I am dressed in a little bit of a different attire than I usually am, but however I'm portraying a peasant from the 13th to the 16th century. So a couple things we can observe from peasants is that they always had a belt or a tie around their tunic, and what they put on their belts or ties is their career. And for me, I would have an axe, which would likely mean that I probably went out into the forest, chopped wood. That was most likely my career as an axeman. And so the colors that were often used for the top half of tunic is red, brown, and black. Or combinations, sometimes they're mixed together because they're dyes, generally speaking. And what these materials are made out of is wool. And an issue with wearing wool, it gets a little bit itchy. Nobody wants to feel itchy. So they decided to, at some point, I don't know, wear linen under it, which is a very nice, soft, comfortable material. And this idea of wearing linen under their tunics was used throughout the 12th to all the way up till the 19th century, before we just developed more comfortable clothes. And for my leggings, if we can look down, you can see here that that they're pulled halfway. Now, this is just a thing that they did. There was no real purpose for it, otherwise than the belief that this was the most beautiful part of the body, and they wanted to express it and didn't want to cover it. However, peasants also wore leggings that went all the way down to the bottom, but that kind of, the idea of doing that was where you were, if you're a little bit more out in town, walking around, you'd probably wear these breeches, but if you were out on the farm, you know, cutting wood, you know, nobody else would see you, you'd probably have leggings all the way down. For the shoes, these aren't accurate shoes. There should be an image right here about the shoes. However, these shoes, they usually were just a piece of leather that was tied together, that went up to here. It was simple black leather usually, nothing too complicated. The idea of using wooden soles didn't come until around the 18th century or so, so you'd start finding that a little bit later. But pretty much what moccasins were, what Native Americans wore. And yeah, let's pan back up. So I, as a child, would wear pretty much an exact copy of what my father would wear, except smaller. They were pretty much exactly the same. For some reason they did that with, if you had your father, you probably have the same profession as your father. Since you were a peasant, it's probably passed down in your family. Just kept going down and down. This is how the peasant system worked. And throughout time, from the 12th to the 16th century, these tunics, these right here, would gradually keep moving up. I don't know why exactly. I think it was either fashion or just ease of movement, because it's like pretty much a kilt or a skirt. But they gradually moved up, and now we're going to move to our 18th century man or child to see how it the clothing style developed. Oh, sorry, wait, one more thing. Let's talk about buttons. So, as you see here, you can see here, these there are buttons here. Now, the idea of using pewter buttons, or any buttons really, didn't come later into the 18th century. Usually this was tied with rope to keep it shut if you're wearing breeches. However, if you're wearing leggings, that's not an issue. Yeah, and also these shoes, what these are trying to represent is buckle shoes without the buckle, which is more of an 18th century development. What they do with their shoes, the medieval peasants would, is they would use rope or small string to tie the leather shoes up and go about here. Now, we're going to transition to see kind of how the change of the average man or child's tunic or clothing would go. So now as we can see the transformation from the 12th to the 16th century to the 18th century, we can see a couple of differences. First of all, I think it's prominent to realize that buttons, as a whole, have become a lot more common with the middle class. As we know, the middle class began after the end of feudalism, after the Crusades, which we just learned about. As we pan down, we can kind of see what I was talking about how tunics, the bottom of them gradually went back up. As we can see here, this used to be down here, but it made itself all the way back up here. Now, why this happened, I'm not sure, but mainly there was no real issue with working. In fact, it probably covered you more from the elements. It was more of just a clothing design, and as I can show you an image later into the 19th century, these even went further up, got into vests. But at the moment, this is a waistcoat, and we can also see here the sleeve that, as we remember, the peasant costume, or sorry, clothing, had a sleeve on it. Now, the fashion of not having sleeves on your main working clothes, it kind of developed later on. However, it was not uncommon for these types of waistcoats to also have sleeves on them. But it varied from person to person. Also, similar to peasants, as I'm sorry I haven't said before, the amount of clothing, of waistcoats, of tunics, they usually had two of everything. They had 2 tunics, 2 pants, 2 socks, 2 pairs of socks and such. A similar thing in the 18th century. If you're the average class, you really only needed to do it 2 times, because they didn't often wash their clothes in the next couple of months. That was often either given to the wife of the family, same thing with peasants, or work ladies who were most prevalent in the 18th century, but they went further back. They were groups of people who were widows. They didn't have any other career, so they chose their career in cleaning clothes, and they had a living from there. Additionally, this is where buttons came into more foreground and were really prominent in clothing. Now, why, I don't know, but it seems like it was just a fashion choice. Many changes in clothing were often due to the fact that, oh, you know what, I think that's the new style. Same thing with our clothing today. What becomes more prominent, while you think something's more functional, can completely leave the ground and change into something completely different for the fact that it looked more better at the time. Similarly with my axe here. Once again, this most likely was my career, since I carried it around with me. Same thing with the peasant. My job once again would probably be an axeman. I probably got into the forest. However, axes were also carried by militiamen, military. This smaller one could have been seen as something used as for the trail, but mainly it was usually their careers which they had on their belts. However, there was more leisure to what they would have. This is a hunting packet, but you could also put anything you want in it, same with the peasants. Also, the size of the belt is thicker. However, it seems like distinctly that the belts were thinner back then, and however, in the early 17th century, they were really thick. They were like this thick. They had really thick belts for some reason. The development of the thickness of belts kind of changed throughout time. Peasants, thinner. Early 18th century, larger. And when you get back into around the 1750s, 60s, come back to this size. Additionally, I have not covered one kind of major factor, hats. So, often, peasants, at least, this is not peasant clothing anymore, we're in the 18th century, it was often, 18th century, you'd wear these kinds of hats. Not often would you wear hoods or coifs, but in the peasant time period, as we can show an image over here, is an image of a coif. So coifs were kind of like hoods, but they were kind of going down to the shoulders. They protected the mid areas and such. Yeah, so that's another major part of it, the hats, or hoods, or however you'd like to put it. They didn't have really great coats or clothing like that. They just had their tunics for the whole entire time. So like in France, where you're closer to it gets generally cold, so they need their hoods, and especially in Britain with the peasants there, they need their hoods. Those hoods would cover down to here, back around, go over the shoulders and such. So if we go back on, I'll show you what I was talking about. As we can see here, it's a better representation of how it worked, where they had a hood put down here. It'd go over the shoulders, pretty much all the way down here, cover two sides. There was a cross in the middle and a cross in the back. And these were really used to protect their heads. They didn't really have anything else. Anyway, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.